Today we're going to paint a scary werewolf. Alright, maybe he's not that scary. Hi guys, Jonathan from Two Raven Studios. If you're new here, welcome. Please consider subscribing. We release new painting videos every week and you don't want to miss out. Today's video is going to be a little bit different than what we normally do. We're going to be painting the Reaper Bonesylvania Lon figure. This line's pretty cool. It's a bunch of chibi horror miniatures. So we're going to be inspired by the old movie posters for these horror movies for this miniature. So we're going to go with the old Wolfman poster where he's going to be brown, and we're going to paint his pants green because he had the green outfit on that movie poster. What we're going to use is what we talked about earlier this week in painting and mixing paints using the primary colors. So to that end, I'm not going to be giving you all different paints I'm using and that sort of thing. I have 5 paints. We have cyan, magenta, yellow, white, and black, and that's it. I'm not even telling you what kind of paints they are because it's not important. We'll just have primary colors and we're going to mix everything we need. So it's going to be a little bit different than what we normally do, how I give you all the different paints I do. Because I always tell you, the paint you use isn't important, and this video is going to prove it. So we're mixing our own paints. So let's get right into it and paint this miniature. So I'm mixing the colors here that I'm going to be needing. So first I'm mixing magenta and yellow with a little black, which is going to give me a brown color, which is going to be the main color on most of this miniature. Just kind of playing around with the color till I'm happy with it. And then I'm creating a highlight by just adding white to that, and then I'm actually going to add some of the other colors back in the white to make it a little bit more of a saturated color that's just a little bit lighter. Next I'm going to create the green by mixing the cyan and the yellow. And that's a little bit dingy, so we want to add a little bit more yellow. And just creating a shade now a little bit by adding some black. Now that we have all our colors prepared, we can start painting the miniature. So what we're doing is just we have all the tones on the palette, and we're just kind of blending them in. I want the furry parts to be slightly darker than the parts that don't look like they're fur. So you can kind of see putting darker colors in areas that would be in shadow, lighter colors areas that would be in light, and again the fur is generally speaking going to be darker than the skin. You kind of see it's a little bit lighter of a fleshy color on the skin that I'm using. And I'm going to speed the video up here a little bit now because you get the idea what's going on. You can see here I used a little bit of pure black to just blend right in the shadows. Since everything's still wet and I'm moving quickly here, everything's still wet in the miniature, and you can just wet blend everything together to give you nice smooth blends. Now we're going to repeat that same process on the pants, just kind of wet blending all the colors together with the greens now instead of the browns. Just lighter tones are going to be in the brighter areas, darker tones in the darker areas. I'm mixing a little bit of the brown in with the green to give us some darker shadows here. So just to give some interest in the shadows, added a little bit of the brown color into it. Now we're going to paint the eyes. I'm using yellow, and you can kind of see I mixed a little bit of magenta and yellow there in the corner, and I'm going to use that orange color that I mixed to shade the eyes. So mainly yellow, shade it with a little bit of orange, and then eventually I'm going to add a little bit of white in that paint too and highlight the eyes as well. The eyes are pretty big on this type of miniature, so you really want to spend some time making them look pretty neat, but with a lot of shades and highlights instead of just painting it one color. So you can see here, I'm mixing some white into that yellow. And now I'm going to add some highlights opposite where I just put the orange in the shadows. Now we're put in the highest areas, we're going to put some white. Now I'm just going to use some black and paint the pupil on the miniature. So, like I said before, this miniature has really big eyes, so take your time with this and get the shape you want of the eye. So you kind of start with like a line, just to give me an idea of where I want the eye looking, and then I'm going to bulk it out into the shape that I want for the pupil here. Once that's done, I'm taking pure white and just adding a little dot of reflection. It really helps sell the glossiness of the eye. The next color we're using is magenta, and then I mixed a little bit of blue and black into it to give me a darker shade as well, and we're painting the inside of the mouth and the tongue with these colors. So it's mainly magenta, a little bit of blue and black for the darker tones in the shadows, and then mixing some white in for the brighter highlights. Like I've been doing everything else, I'm just moving quickly and wet blending this all together. So in this step, what I did was I mixed white, black, and some yellow to create a bone color for the teeth. So it was just, I mixed a gray up and then added yellow until I was happy with how it looked, and using that for the teeth. Adding more white to it to highlight, and using actually the brown that's already on the palette, mixing into it to shade it as we go. So I'm just quickly going through this part. I'm just further refining what's on the pants now that the initial layer's dry, just adding more highlights and shadows to further refine the look of it. So same thing we were doing earlier, I'm just further refining it a little bit, adding some yellow and white a little bit to give me an even brighter color for some highlights. Here I'm mixing up a gray and then adding just a touch of blue to it, the cyan there, and kind of painting the stonework on the base. And then I'm using some white to give me some highlights here and there. Kind kind of see how I'm blending it from the edges. And I wasn't really happy with the tone. I want to give it a little bit more of an earthy tone. So now I'm just taking some of the brown that's already on the palette, and you can kind of see what I'm going to do here. Just use the wet paint and blend it into the other colors to give me a bit more of an earthy tone. You can use some more gray, mix it in there, and just mix the colors together. Again, using white to highlight a little bit here. Kind of see the end result there. So now I've mixed a bit of a light tan color. This is white with some yellow and a little bit of magenta, and we're painting the rope belt that he has around his waist with this. Then again, we're just going to use white to highlight once we get the base coat on. So now I really want to refine the skin, which is kind of the main feature of this miniature. So I have some white mixed into the previous colors already on the palette, and just kind of adding highlights here and there around the skin. Speed this up a little bit and get the idea of what I'm doing. It's just like we did on the pants. Once the initial layer is dry, we can further refine it now and add more layers on top, kind of blending everything in together. And then I'm using a darker color now and further refining the shadows. I'm not worried about the skin right here, and what I did, if you notice there, I mixed a little bit of a purple color by mixing the cyan and magenta and mix that in with the brown for the deepest shadows. Just gives it a little bit more of a fleshy look and brings some life into the skin. So now we're going to further refine the fur. So everything else is pretty much done at this point. We just want to get that fur a little bit more of a pop. So just kind of play around with all the colors. You can see how many different tones are sitting on that palette. Just play around with the different browns and darken things up. What I'm doing here is I'm actually just dry brushing over the fur with a lighter shade. I just mix some white into the brown that's on there. And then I'm just going to go back in with the actual brush and further refine those highlights. Then I kind of mix some black in with that brown to give me, and thinned it down with some water to give me almost like a wash, and kind of did a wash over the fur again just to kind of really pick out those texture of it by darkening down those recesses. The last thing we need to do here is paint the nose. I want it to stand out a little bit more, so mixing some black in with the brown to give us a very dark, almost black color, painting the nose. We're going to highlight this by adding some white into this, and then we're also going to add some of the brown colors and try to blend it on the backside into the skin, so it's not an abrupt transition. We kind of wanted to feather it out. Kind of see on the top here how I'm using browns to kind of feather it into the skin. And I just want to show you the state of the palette. Those 5 original colors at the top, look at all the different tones we've gotten by mixing them together. So you can really do fun stuff. And here is the finished miniature in all its glory. This was just a fun miniature. Painting these type of cartoony miniatures can be a lot of fun because since the features are exaggerated, there's a lot of room to play and kind of experiment, especially like with the eyes, how they're so big. But this was a lot of fun to paint and I really enjoyed this process. So I hope you found that useful. If you did, please leave a like. And I'm going to challenge you all. So you saw how I painted this miniature with just the primary colors and mixing everything together. Challenge yourself. Try it out for yourself. So grab yourself the colors you need to mix all the paints. So you have 5 colors, should be it. Black, white, cyan, yellow, magenta. From those 5 colors, you should be able to mix anything you need when painting a miniature. It's a fun challenge like I did today. So I challenge myself. You should challenge yourself too. Please, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel over here. And we also have some other videos over here that you might find useful. Until next time, keep on gaming and paint your minis.